In 2023, I became a reader. Here's how it went. First and foremost, I want to serve my Lord and Savior Jesus by bringing Him glory. Glory to Him first and not to myself. So I will be talking about God here and the healing that He is doing for me in my life. I want this platform to serve as a creative outlet for me. My husband recommended me to have creative outlets for my mental health, and I also wanted to help people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, OCD, and physical injuries, and I'll get more into that kind of stuff later. But it can be really hard to enjoy life when you're constantly guilt-ridden and you're worried about the past, constantly performing compulsions like cleaning and watching YouTube or seeking validation from others. I medically retired from the United States Marine Corps last year, and I'm working on my bachelor's in Spanish so that I can become a translator. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a disabled veteran or a female Marine on BookTube, so maybe I'm the first, who knows. However, in the meantime, I wanted something to give me a sense of purpose, especially since I'm out of school right now, waiting hip surgery that I will be getting later this month in January. I was watching a lot of vlogs on YouTube, and then Haley Pham started reading, and it honestly started to influence me, and I knew also that my husband loved to read, and I wanted to read something that he also loved to get me started. I wanted to get the real stories from my favorite movies like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and I believe that books are truly a blessing and can help with empathy, decreasing stress, and in my opinion, helping you get out of your own head. Now that that's over, let's talk about some amazing books. I only read 10 this year, but that's because I am a slow reader and I do focus on books that I know that I will enjoy, and I do not skim read. I actually try to sit down, relax, and enjoy. Third time is the charm, am I right? Now that we're into the book portion of today's video, let's talk about the first book that I have read, which is Crime and Punishment. I'll also tell you guys that I will be looking off to the side because I do have notes for myself, because I want to be able to give y'all a good description of each book and also be able to remember my ratings, which month I read them in. I want to be able to formulate it in what the book is about, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then my conclusion, basically, so that I keep everybody on board as well as myself, so that I don't start rambling, because I will. The first book I finished in March, and that was Crime and Punishment, which was a 3.25 stars for me. This book was about a man who committed a very terrible crime and then had to live with himself after that, basically to live with the psychological impacts of what he did. He feels remorse, goes through a lot of emotions, and it really changes him as a person. And while that is or can be interesting. Okay, if my camera's moving, it's because my cat is running around behind it.
Thanks, Moto. So kind.
Now, what I liked about this book was the descriptions. They were easy to understand, easy to follow. However, there are a lot of characters in this book, and a lot of them I don't really care about. I would say I don't really have strong feelings for any of the characters, but he did know how to create that emotion of sadness and remorse, and it was a downer. It did make me feel some type of way. It did make me feel kind of upset, and so it took me like 7 to 8 months to actually read this, and it is quite long, and it is a literary fiction, and I think it might be historical literary fiction. If not, it's just set in previous time. Also, it was the first book that I read in a very long time, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe if I were to have read it a little bit later in my reading journey, maybe I would have liked it more, but I just didn't. So in conclusion, I did read this book because of my husband. It is one of his favorite books, and I wanted to understand what he liked so much about the book. I wanted to be able to talk with him about it, and unfortunately I did not like it as much as he does. I do feel a little bad about that, but I'm glad that I was able to read it, and it did, no matter what, it kickstarted my journey of I want to start reading, because it felt so good to be able to just complete a book and be like, oh my gosh, I read a book that I didn't have to read. It felt really good. It felt like accomplishing a little goal, and I think that's what's so great about reading too, is just accomplishing your little goals. Maybe that's why people like reading so much, is because you do get that little kick of like happiness. The next book was The Hobbit. I also finished this in March as well. It was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. This book is about a race of humanoid people who Tolkien created himself. They are very easygoing. They don't like to get out of the Shire, which is where they're from. This follows one hobbit specifically who has to go on an adventure with some dwarves to do something. I don't want to like spoil it if you haven't heard of it or haven't watched the movie. I haven't watched the Hobbit movies. I only watched the first one. I was very disappointed as a child, and I was like, I don't like this movie, so don't even bother with the Hobbit movies. The Lord of the Rings movies do. But yes, so they fight monsters, they do lots of cool things. It is very adventurous, and they even meet a dragon called Smaug, who's on the front of the book. I loved how funny this book was, how wholesome it was, and the characters were endearing. I think Tolkien created a really lovable like species or creature or race, whatever you want to call the hobbits. I can't say that I didn't like anything. I would say that some people may not be drawn to this book because it was written for a younger audience, and you can definitely tell. However, I think if you want a wholesome book, this story is perfect for adults, for kids who want to get into fantasy. If you watched The Lord of the Rings but you're not ready to get into the books, The Hobbit is a great place to start. Really easy to follow. You don't have to worry about remembering a whole bunch of characters or anything crazy like that. So highly recommend, really, for anyone. It's just really like wholesome, and there is no romance either, although there is romance in Lord of the Rings. Speaking of the Lord of the Rings, the next book I read was The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. It was a 5 out of 5 stars. I finished it in April, and this, again, a hobbit who, again, doesn't like going out of the Shire or anything, wasn't expecting this. He has to go on an unexpected journey and save the world from a force of evil, and he has to join forces with dwarves and elves and these and other hobbits. And these races or species, creatures, they don't really necessarily get along with each other, but they form a fellowship because they have to, because like the council decides, hey, you guys have to go on this journey together. They form this fellowship amidst the adversity that they have. I think it creates really beautiful friendships. What I liked, I basically loved everything about this book. It was a really great beginning to a series, or really it is just one book technically, so it is a great first part. Did not disappoint at all. He creates really great characters, and each one of them comes from their own place, and it's very specific to them. So elves come from a very specific background, hobbits come from a very specific background, and it really adds a lot to their characters. I feel like sometimes, you know, you'll read about the place they come from and it really doesn't add anything. They're like, okay, they, you know, came from this house or they came from this land and whatever. It really adds to their personalities in ways I feel like maybe other authors don't do as well. I haven't read that much though, so if you have books that you feel this way about, tell me about it. His descriptions are very, very good, and I will also say I love Tom Bombadil. Okay, he's very whimsical. A lot of people hate him, and I have no idea why. I really liked the part of the book that he was in. I don't know why, I just really enjoyed it. And then I wouldn't say I disliked anything, but Tolkien has a very deep appreciation for nature, and you can really tell because he goes on to describe nature a lot. So it is a bit slower paced because of that, but I wouldn't say that it necessarily takes away from the book. So yeah, basically, great beginning to Lord of the Rings. I love the Shire, which is where this starts, and it's great for anyone who wants to see, you know, what really happened in the Lord of the Rings, or wants to see more of the Lord of the Rings characters. If you have watched the movie, I wouldn't recommend this for newer fantasy readers unless you want to know where fantasy started. And from what I hear, fantasy started with Tad Williams, J.R.R. Tolkien, and C.S. Lewis for basically like what fantasy is today. The next book is The Lightning Thief, and I cannot hold up each and every one of these books because it hurts my thumb. I have thumb injuries, just to let y'all know. Okay, that'll work. The Lightning Thief was a 5 out of 5 stars as well, and this is about a boy who finds out, and he's very young. I finished this in May. This book is about a young boy who discovers his differences are what makes him special and what sets him apart from other people in the best way. He's been getting kicked out of school, he's dyslexic, I believe he has ADHD as well. Finds out one of his best friends isn't exactly what he thought he was. His mom's been keeping secrets from him, and that he has to go to another place for protection, that the world as he sees it isn't what the world is actually like. If that makes sense. I will say I was watching the Percy Jackson show, and I did not like him in the first 2 episodes because I thought it was very like whiny and wasn't very witty. And then as you get into episode 3 and 4, he becomes a little bit more like he is in the book, more witty, kind of cracks these insults very quick, and he's like that in the books, and I really love his character in the book. I liked just about everything about this book. Physical and mental disabilities is portrayed in a way that makes people special instead of making them, you know, different or perceived as, you know, whatever, disabled. It really makes them more able to do other things that like regular people cannot see. And if you read the book, then you will understand what I am saying by that. I don't know, I think it's really good for kids to kind of like look at life in a more like whimsical way. This book is very easy to read, it's very easy to get through, it's very fast, it's very fun, it's very adventurous. I love the characters, especially Percy and Grover and Annabeth and their relationships with each other. I like Clarice. I like the reason she's there, just kind of for the, oh well, this is the girl we don't like, and I think that it's good to have those sort of characters. I wouldn't say there's really anything I don't like about this book either. I will say a lot of people will find that there's a lack of diversity in this book, in The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit, because these books are older. Not that that is a good excuse for them, but that a lot of newer fantasies are bringing in the diversity, and the show is bringing them in the diversity, so it is still a good book. It's still a great book. I really loved it. In conclusion, this book, great for young people, it's great for older people as long as you don't mind like a 12-year-old changing, you know, the fate of humanity and saving the world. I think it's great for anyone who wants to get into fantasy or anyone who wants a fast-paced book that is going to get them out of a book slump. I think this book will be really great for that. It's really cute and sweet and adventurous. Moving on to the next book, which I finished in June, which is also a 5 out of 5 stars. It is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, the second part in The Lord of the Rings. Well, it's the second part, so I can't say very much. However, it is a continuation of the Fellowship's journey. You get to see more of two characters that you don't get to see as much of in the movies. I didn't really have strong feelings towards them in the movies, but the books made me have very strong feelings towards them. And when you read the book, you will know. You get to see more about Ents, which is my favorite creature that Tolkien has created. I will say that he created Ents. I don't know if there was like a previous creator, and I loved them. And you get so much of them in this book. And I think that this book also has the best adventure out of the three parts. Again, what I liked is the relationships between the elves and the dwarves and the hobbits and the other creatures as well that they meet. The adventure, very good. There wasn't anything I didn't like. It's just a great middle book, great middle parts to a series, and it made me immediately want to pick up The Return of the King. The Return of the King is the next book I read. I finished it in June. It is a 5 out of 5 stars as well for me. This is the last part of The Lord of the Rings. The battle scenes in this are very epic. I really enjoyed it. Again, enjoyed the relationships. I forgot to say there are also humans in this. The relationships with the humans are really good as well. Lord of the Rings is also set in Middle-earth, and it is Tolkien's made-up history of the world. Like, this is supposed to be what happened before our recorded history, and it's supposed to be the only records of that history, and it ends so well. Every character gets their own ending, and it all makes sense, and it all feels very complete. I care really deeply about all of the characters except for one of them, who I think is kind of aloof, though it makes sense because he is an elf and perceives time a bit differently, so his reactions and the things that he does is not going to be as dramatic, I would say, because, you know, although it might have been weeks or months, I don't know exactly the time frame, he will see it as, oh, this is a bad weekend, because he lives for literally so long. So it makes sense. I really loved him in the movies, but in the books, I really just loved his relationship with someone else. What I liked, everything. I couldn't ask for a more perfect ending. Loved it. I shed a tear. The next book is The Lies of Lamora. Don't let the cover fool you, because although it may look like it should be tucked away far into your grandfather's bookshelves, it is a fantastic book. 4.8 out of 5 stars. I finished reading in August. Very specific rating, I know. Let's just ignore that, okay? Because I need to be specific sometimes because it is not, it's like more than a 4.75, but it's just gotta be at 4.8, okay? So this book is about a boy who is an orphan who lives in a very terrible city, really just a very terrible world. The author sets up this book with him being very young and being a great thief, which actually is a problem because although he is growing up to be a thief and that's like what he's being trained to do, he's just too good at it. And so he endures a lot of trauma throughout the entire book, even from a young age. The people he meets become his true friends and they have this found family where they just work so well together. I love their wittiness. I love each character feels so separate from each other. They all have their own specific things. They all have their specific faults. And I think that Scott Lynch created characters that all had really good faults because you can't have good characters without them having faults and things that make you kind of like angry at them, but things that make you love them at the same time. And although you're following, you could say, morally gray people, it is a book that is set in just a terrible world. But speaking of the world, Scott Lynch's writing is absolutely amazing. I love it. It is unlike any fantasy I've ever read before. His descriptions are really unlike anything I've ever seen before. The world is anything like anything I've ever read before. I just love this book so much. There are so many things to love about this book. It just kept me going. It's over 700 pages and yet I just wanted to keep reading it. Like I felt so fast paced for me because I was just enjoying every second of this book. Now, I will say that this book is basically about Locke, who is the main character, the people he meets, and then the crimes that they do, and a big heist that they are trying to pull off, and what happens in the meantime, and what are the things that they do in between then, and the people they need to pay off, and the other things that they need to do just in their everyday life. And Scott Lynch, everything is interesting to me. Like every part, everything, every little thing that they do was so interesting, and I love the way that he wrote the book because he wrote it in like little sections that made you feel really accomplished. Because like there'd be a couple paragraphs and it just says part 2 of like chapter 1 or something like that. And then there's also intermissions where you go back into the past. And I really enjoyed that because it kept you wanting to read more because you get to like a little cliffhanger in the present, but then he goes into an intermission and then you have to go back to the past. But then he puts you on another cliffhanger for the past. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, am I frustrated or do I just want to keep reading? Ultimately, I just wanted to keep reading because it was really refreshing to be able to read something that was set up so much differently than a lot of other books. I'm really excited to see what the next book has in store. I will say that I just liked very little about this book, which is why it's a 4.8. There was prostitution and slaves, and I, as someone who's experienced some trauma and stuff, things like that will bother me a little bit more than will bother other people. And it was very important to the plot, I think. I think it also could have been left out, but it was important for what Scott Lynch was trying to get across, the point he was trying to get across, trying to make people be like, this is a terrible leader, this is terrible like gang leader or something. And so it wasn't just thrown in needlessly. So I got the point he was trying to make from what he had described. Those scenes were very short, and for a 700 plus page book, I'm not very mad at that. There's also another part of this book that it didn't bother me at all, but it may bother other people, and that was that there is so much cursing in it. I don't think that it is juvenile in any sort of way. I don't think it makes him seem young or makes him seem like he's trying too hard. I really enjoyed it. I think, that's just how he was describing things. That's just the author that he wanted to be. It doesn't bother me. I'm a Marine, so I don't know, my tolerance may be higher now. Yeah, so in conclusion, if you are looking for something that is very different, especially to the fantasy genre, then this is the book for you, or really just a book that is so different and will have you just so curious about what is going to happen next in both the past and the present and the future. So 3 things. So it is just so complex, it's so captivating, and yet it's not hard to understand. It's very easy to keep up with, and Scott Lynch makes sure that you understand, and it's, I don't know, I didn't want to put this book down. I loved it. The next book was Fahrenheit 451. This is a 5 out of 5 stars. I finished this in September and this book is literally life-changing. It's about a man who meets this young girl who is his neighbor. This man is a firefighter. He burns books because that's what they do. Reading is a crime in their society. So this young girl who is his neighbor comes up to him and just starts asking him questions one day, and he's like, I don't know the answers to your questions. And then he starts realizing, oh my gosh, I don't know the answers to her questions, which is about his life and the world around him. And it starts waking him up to what is going on. And it is a science fiction book, so they have all these screens, and it's basically just captivating people to the point of they don't remember how they met people. They don't remember lots of like basic knowledge things or just things about their life, and they're just moving on day-to-day life, worrying more about the people who are in the screens than the people who are actually sitting next to them. And basically the story goes from there. I don't want to give too much, but it's crazy how our society doesn't feel very far away from the society that is described in this book. And this book was written quite a while ago. I'll have to look up what the actual date was, but it was written quite a while ago. I loved that this book made me think. It made me think about what I do in my everyday life and our society as a whole. Just how much we're on screens and how much it affects us, and like even like the parasocial relationships and stuff like that is described kind of in a different way in this book, but still is applicable to like what a lot of us are dealing with or what a lot of our society is dealing with. And I basically read it in one sitting. It is very fast-paced, and although it's fast-paced, the descriptions are so good. You can see everything that is happening. You have a lot of empathy for what this man is going through, and you feel really bad for him. For Ray Bradbury to have you really care about the people in this book when it's only like a little over 200 pages or so is pretty crazy, and I think that just really shows how good of a writer this man is. There's so much emotional depth in this book. It is so good. There's nothing I disliked. All in all, it's a great read. I recommend it to any reader, or really any person in general, and just please read it. It's life-changing. If you like reading books, you're going to like reading this book. As weird as that sounds, if you like reading books, you're gonna like this book. Assassin's Apprentice is the next book I read. It's a 4.75 out of 5 stars. I finished it in October. This book is book 1 in the Farseer trilogy, which is a part of a bigger series, which is 16 books long, which is the Elderlings trilogy, or Elderlings saga, I think, from Robin Hobb, who is a female fantasy author. And let's just talk about how crazy this book is. So basically, fantasy book set in medieval times. Grandpa comes up to the door with this 6-year-old grandson and his mom and says, I can't take care of this boy no more. His mom can't take care of her. Here, take him. He's at the door of a kingdom, and he's a son to the king in waiting. And they're like, the king in waiting is married and she cannot have kids. What do you mean he has a kid? Born out of wedlock before he got with her. That's right. And so in their society that is looked down upon very, very seriously, they don't like it. They think it's just like basically forbidden. And this 6-year-old boy is our main character, and he goes through a lot of trauma. This book has a lot of good slice of life, and everything that she writes is so important to the plot. Like, and especially when you get to the end of this book, I needed to take a break because it is slow paced, because she does describe a lot of things, although I really like it because it helps me to see it like it's a movie. It does feel long, though enjoyable. So it's just one of those things where I want to take my time in this book to read it and really take in everything, and it is kind of sad, especially the second book for whatever reason makes me feel even more sad. So, and I don't know if that's just a me thing, but I know that he has a very depressing life. He also possesses 2 different magics, and one of them is forbidden. And that plays so much into the story, and it's so interesting. I love the character work that Robin Hobb does. Like, each character is very much their own. They have their own quirks, they have their own faults, they have their own strengths. Even more so than Scott Lynch's writing. You care so much about these characters, and the characters that you hate
them with every fiber of your being.
You just with some of those characters, but that's what makes it even more enjoyable in my opinion. Yeah, so what I didn't like, because it is a 4.75, is just the pacing feels a bit slow at times. Even though I did really like it and everything was important to the story, I still don't want to get into a slump because of it. I don't know how to describe that, because I don't want to make it seem like slow is bad. It's just one of those books you need to take your time with. In conclusion, great first book. The second book is feeling like a 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm almost halfway through. It is over 500 pages, maybe over 600 pages, I think. It's quite a hefty book, so I am also reading Harry Potter at the same time as reading it. I think I'm actually just taking a break from the second book right now. But if you are character and plot driven, honestly, or either or, you're gonna love these books. If you love high fantasy, more classical feelings fantasy, you're going to love this. If you want to feel like you're watching a movie, okay, this is it. Alright, so the last book of the year was The Sea of Monsters, the second book in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. 4.75 out of 5 stars. Finished it in October. Second book, I don't want to say very much. Another character was introduced into the series, and I did really enjoy them. I enjoyed how they came in and what the importance that they played, the role that they played in this book. Percy, once again, finds himself going on another adventure that in this one, I think he wasn't really supposed to go on it. But he went on it anyway. And I really liked the adventure that took place during the book. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily disliked anything about the book. It just didn't feel the same as the first one. And maybe I just built it up too much in my head, because this was the only one of these books that I read as a kid. For whatever reason, I did not know it was a series. When I saw the original cover, I was like, this looks cool. I need to pick it up. I need to read it right now. It was my favorite book. And then I started reading The Lightning Thief as a kid, and I was like, wow, this is really boring. And so I just kind of stopped. I think I just kind of stopped reading after that too, for whatever reason. So maybe I just hyped the book up, but I did really like it. It's still really highly rated. Obviously, it's a 4.75. I loved this book. It just didn't give me that feeling of oh, this is a 5-star. Maybe it was just part of the adventure, which I really don't want to get into. But part of it felt kind of this is okay, but this isn't as cool as the first one. Doesn't feel as new and exciting as the first one. It's just kind of oh, this is a weird part of the book. Again, still enjoying the series that is coming out for it, and I'm kind of hoping that I will continue to read the books as the show is coming out, but be able to be ahead, but be able to, spot the differences, because I'm spotting so many differences only within the first 4 episodes, which is only taking place in the first book. And I'm liking it, but again, there's going to be those differences in the story and the plot, not even what the characters look like or anything like that. I don't really care about that. I care about how the characters are acting. And Percy was not really acting like himself in the first 2 movies, and now he is. And here I am rambling about the show when I'm supposed to be talking about my year in review and the books that I read. Again, this book, great for kids and adults alike and people who want to get into fantasy. I will continue on with the series. I'm very excited to continue on with the series, actually. And yeah, so basically that is all the books that I read in 2023. I only read 10 books. However, I think that is not bad for 10 months, 10 books, 1 book each month technically. I had a great time, and because I'm reading 2 books right now. Royal Assassin right here, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb, and it has taken me a very long time to get through. And then I am reading Harry Potter, and I'm kind of wanting to binge that soon, because I just really want to read this entire series and then talk about it. And my friend is also going to be reading it with me, so I'm very excited. Yeah, sorry if I've sounded a little tired in this video, because it is 11 o'clock at night, so I am a little tired. But thank you so much for joining me, everyone who did. I'm hoping that I actually post this one, and that 3rd time really was the charm. But yeah, God bless. Y'all have a great day. Bye.